1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in a Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the Hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters don't move.
Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to Life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard damn! Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. Yeah, that's me gassing on the intro, and if you want to cop that song, both versions is available, and available only on a 10-song CD. Yeah, that's right, I said it, man. CD. Tap in with your boy. You can hit me up at 16tolifemusic@gmail.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at 16tolife. Cash at me $20 and get you one of these, man. I get it to you ASAP. Now let's hop right up in the story, man. So for a long time, people had been asking me who I was referring to on that song when I said I knew a man who lost his life and he was only doing 5.
Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5.
So I'm gonna finally get to that story for y'all.
We begin our broadcast tonight with a deadly riot at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo. KSBY News reporter Alexa Bertola explains what happened.
Kelsey, it's a much different scene out here this evening, much quieter than it was just several hours ago when more than 150 inmates rioted. Tonight, 1 inmate is dead and 8 others are injured.
Chaos at the California Men's Colony. One ambulance after another rushed inmates to the hospital. A massive riot broke out at a yard in the East facility. With more than 160 inmates involved in the melee, CMC correctional officers used 40mm less than lethal rounds and chemicals to try to bring the chaos under control. None of the staffers were hurt. 9 inmates were stabbed.
When we call a mass casualty incident, we call for all hands on deck.
Several had critical wounds.
Our trauma surgeon did request that the OR crew come and be here on standby.
1 inmate died at the hospital. CMC staff say that man was 25-year-old Matthew Cook. He was serving nearly 14 years for several counts of first-degree burglary.
So Matthew Cook was a white crip. He was from Central California somewhere, or I believe the Stockton area. I'm not 100% sure. Me and Matthew just so happened to be on the same tier together. Matthew was probably, I would say, maybe 5-6 cells down from me, right? And I'll get into how I met him a little later on. So this story takes place at a prison known as California Men's Colony, CMC East. Now, CMC East was a level 3, as I just mentioned, a medium security prison. Now, when I got to CMC East, some of my homies informed me that the Southerners or the Mexicans, by rules they had among their structure, were not allowed or were not supposed to be at that prison. And they had 72 hours to come to the prison, to then leave the reception cell, because when you initially get sent to CMC East, you're put in a reception cell for about 24 hours. Now that reception, when you're put in that reception cell, the cell just so happens to face the yard. It has like a grilled gate on the cell, on the window cover. You can look out the window and see the yard. When dudes see convicts coming across the yard being put into the building that houses the convicts that's getting ready to put in a reception cell, whether they're Mexican, black, whatever, once they get put in there, people will go on the side of the track right there. I may have a video to show you, and they'll holler in there, hey, what's up, man, where y'all from, and so on and so forth. And so now once they get put in that cell, if they decide not to stay, my homies told me that they had 72 hours to come to the yard, get cracking, by way of violence, and leave. Now they had to leave by way of violence in order to show when they got to wherever they was going after that they refused to program and they left by violence. Now for those who refuse to stay at CMC East for whatever reason, after that 72-hour period, they were deemed no longer good. And in the event they happen to go to another prison after that, they would definitely be dealt with, right? Now, when I first got there, at this particular time, I had been incarcerated about 10 years. And I had never heard of anything like that. The whole entire time I had been incarcerated and doing time with Southsiders, they of course was with the business. They was unified. They was definitely nothing to be played with. I'm keeping it 100. I definitely had a high opinion of their structure, especially due to their unity, right? And so I just didn't believe it. I was telling my homies, man, I don't believe that. I ain't never heard nothing like that. I'm coming from a 4-yard anyway, right? And so due to the fact that it was such a large number of them there, I just couldn't believe it, right? So I'm staying there, right? And eventually I found out, yes, that it was true. I never forget, across the hall, I had two Hispanic neighbors, man. Their names was I'm gonna just call them S and G, man. S and G. S was the younger of the two. G was older. When I say older, I would probably say G was probably in his late 30s. S was probably somewhere in his early 20s. Now, the Southerners at CMC East who chose to stay despite whatever edict was issued that they was not supposed to be there, they still had a semblance of structure like they would at any other prison. Dudes, my homies and stuff was saying that those dudes there was basically like dropouts and stuff like that just for being there, right? And so like I said, I didn't believe it because, in my opinion, I had heard things about, when you hear the word dropout or when you hear the word dudes that's no longer good, you just don't think of, dudes that are still programming and structuring. And so to me, they look like any other Southsider car that I had done time around. G didn't have no problem with coming over to our cell, hanging out, talking to my cellie. My cellie was a crip from Long Beach, man. I don't think he would mind me saying his name, so I'm gonna say his name. Big Dimp, well-known, reputable, right? And Dimp would chop it up with G. G would come over there, hang out, so on and so forth, kick back, make a spread over there, eat with us and everything. Now S was a younger dude, right? Like I said, S was probably in his early 20s. And I believe S was still more impressionable and still wanted to be seen in good standings with the Southsiders who were there on that particular yard, right? Or the Mexicans, because they still, like I said, they still programmed like any other Southside car, right? Regardless of the fact that they was at this particular prison. So I remember I was working in the laundry and S wanted me to take some of his clothes back there and have them pressed. So he said, hey man, yeah, just get them back to me when ain't nobody looking. And so he still was a little concerned, right, with what his homies thought about him. But G, he didn't care about none of that stuff, right? So one day, there was a dude walking down the hall, another Hispanic dude. Now, like I said, this was a level 3 prison. Now, this Hispanic dude who was walking down the hall, he had got in trouble a couple of times, got caught with wine or whatever, and now his points was no longer consistent with a level 3. So he had ran his points up to a level 4, and now he was being sent back to a level 4. And so when he would be walking down the hall, S and G, especially the older one, G, he used to like to clown and stuff. He used to say, dead man walking, and then all the Hispanics in the hall, they would start laughing, right? Now, as cold as it may sound, that's what it was, right? And so what he was implying was that this dude who was a level 3 and going back to the 4-yard, once he got back to the 4-yard and had to present his paperwork that he was coming from the level 3, he was going to get dealt with, right? So that's when it dawned on me that, okay, yeah, what they saying is true, right? And so then I started to see, from time to time, you would have Southerners who would get there and they wouldn't want to stay. So they would come to the yard and they would hit the yard. They would take a couple of laps. They would find somebody and they would get cracking, right? 9 times out of 10, they would start a fight or start fighting with other Hispanics. Every now and then they might jump on a white dude. Every now and then they may jump on a black dude if they caught him slipping, right? But for the most part, they would catch fades with other Mexicans who had chose to stay, and they would leave that way. One time, because just so happens that reception cell was right in front of also the snack bar, right? They had a snack bar there. And so I had seen a Mexican go over there to the window, and he was asking the dudes were they gonna stay, and he was telling them, listen man, if you guys choose not to stay, we'll give you a head up fade, we won't jump you, so on and so forth, right? So they was letting them know, hey man, if you don't want to stay, come out here, you know, if you want to squabble with somebody, pick your squabble and you can do it that way. Now, among the blacks, among the Asians, and among the Paisas, we had no issue from our people or no order from our people that this prison was off limits, because this prison was a general population prison. Now, for whatever reason, among their structure, they had chose not to come to this prison, and that also applied to the Northerners and to the whites, to be fair, right? And so when I say it was a different dynamic at CMC East, what I'm talking about is there was very little to no political BS or whatever, or political programming that you would see at these other prisons, meaning that even though you had a lot of Mexicans who were there who didn't necessarily program with the blacks, didn't do certain things with the blacks like they would at any other prison, you had some who did, man. Case in point, you had one Hispanic dude. He was the quarterback for a black football team there, you know, and the other Mexicans, they didn't trip on him or you know, give him hell, right? From time to time, you'd have a couple of Mexicans come over there and play basketball with the blacks, right? And, you know, you didn't have blacks there politicking or tripping with them, like saying, hey, they can't come over here or whatever. You know, they was welcome to come hang out and do whatever. So I remember one particular time I was working as a porter, which is pretty much just like a janitor in the hospital at CMC East, right? And at one point in time, a young northerner started to work back there with me and a few of my co-workers, right? And later on, as we started talking and got cool, he told me about his decision to stay at that prison, and also the protocol that the northerners have to go through in order to stay, because as I mentioned earlier, it was also in the Northerners program that they was not supposed to stay at that prison. I don't know if it was for 72 hours or 48 hours. Now, they kept all the Northerners and all the Southerners apart. So all the Southerners were on A yard. All the Northerners was on B yard. But we happened to work together in the hospital, right? And so initially he told me when he got there that he had planned not to stay. I believe, if my memory serves me correct, he was on his second term. And he still, of course, wanted to be seen as an upstanding northerner, so on and so forth. Now, with him, once he got to CMC, they didn't have any cells available for him. So what happened with him was he had to go to the hole. And the hole, the hole is pretty much just like the building that they keep people in. The hole is pretty much like the reception building on A yard. You can look out in the particular cell that he was in. You can look out the cell and see the yard, right? So he told me it was a few other northerners back there. So he was just being held in the hole until a cell became available. So he told me that during conversation with the northerners, they was explaining the protocol to him and what he had to do to go to the yard and get off on a northerner and then come back to the hole, get his paperwork saying that he refused the program and he left by violence, and he would be still in good standings or whatever, right? And so he's telling me now, in the 2 or 3 days it took for a cell to come available, periodically he's glancing out the window, just so happened where his cell just so happened to be by also the snack bar, and he's seeing dudes out there, going to the snack bar, which is extremely rare, because I believe that only maybe 3 or 4 prisons out of the 33 male prisons that California had back then had a snack bar where you could go to this snack bar any day, all day. And as long as you had what was known as a ducat, you could purchase these ducats from the main canteen. The ducats were like $1, and you could purchase up to 50 ducats. You could go back and forth to this, to this mini canteen and get popcorn, ice cream, soda, candy, so on and so forth, chips and things like that. He told me in the course of him glancing out the window while he was watching convicts go back and forth to this mini canteen grabbing an ice cream, he was thinking to himself, damn, it's been a long time since I had an ice cream. I sure would like an ice cream. And so, eventually when his turn came to be released to the yard, he told me the procedure. Once he came to the yard, the Northerners who was there on the yard and had chose to stay hit him up immediately. They pretty much pressed up on him and surrounded him and gave him the business and told him, hey, listen, man, are you staying or not? Because if you're not staying, we finna to get with your program. We finna to hop on your helmito lefts and rights with all our might. They wasn't giving him the option of fighting somebody one-on-one like the Mexicans on AR, right? And so I guess he had made up his mind to stay. And so they told him, well, listen, man, for the next 72 hours, every time you come to this yard, you have to walk with your hands behind your back. If you happen to remove your hands from behind your back, that will be seen as a sign of aggression, and basically we gonna take flight and mix you like some Betty Crocker cake mix out here. You know what I'm saying? And so I guess after he done that, at some point in time, once the Northerners felt comfortable that he was going to stay, they gave him a couple of ducats and went over there and bought him an ice cream, right? So he's chilling, eating the ice cream. Now he says as he's eating the ice cream, one of the other Northerners who he was in the hole with previously looked out and seen him eating the ice cream. They said, hey man, what's up? What you doing out there, man? What you doing? He said, man, I'm eating the ice cream. You know what I'm saying? He basically, so he letting them know, man, I'm staying, And so that was the protocol that they had to go through, right? And he said, man, initially he had planned on coming to the yard and getting off, and staying within good standards. But he said, he got to thinking about it. He only had, I can't remember exactly how much time he had to do, but it wasn't much. And he was basically tired of the program that the Northerners was pushing, and he wanted to do his time pretty much as he wanted to do it. And so he ended up choosing to stay. Now back to A-Yard. A lot of times when you would get Southerners who was refusing to stay, and they would have to go to that reception hole for 24 hours and then they would be released. A lot of times it was almost like a spectacle or a gladiator type atmosphere among the guards who worked there. They would pretty much basically kick back and watch and see what was going to happen when you had Southerners who was new to the yard getting released, right? They, of course, would get the buzz on the radio or whatever, or knew what time that they was going to be released, and they would post up in different little areas and they would watch, when the new Southsiders got there and see what was going to happen if they chose to stay or not. Because I mean, among most men, who doesn't like to see a good fight, right? And I remember one time in particular, you had some Southerners hit the yard and they chose not to stay and they started fighting. Once they started fighting, just so happened 2 COs was walking past me. One of them said, hey man, look, they fighting, let's go. The other dude said, no man, kick back, let's walk over there, let's watch what happens. And so, like I said before, like any other man, most times, men, we love to see a fight, right? And so to them, it was sort of like a spectacle, almost like a gladiator type atmosphere a lot of times, right? When this situation would happen. The numbers of the Mexicans on that particular yard, sometimes it would be a lot of them, and at other times it would seem like it wasn't really a whole bunch of them, right? Now, never once for the whole entire time that I was there did they ever have any specific workout designated spots. Like, now you had one section of dips and pull-up bars is where the Crips worked at. You had another section is where the Bloods worked at. They also had various dips and pull-up bars and stuff like that spread out through the yard where they was for the others or for the whites or if they was neutral. And sometimes you would have Mexicans go over there and work out, but they never had a designated spot that was designated as their own, and for the whole entire time that I was there, they never even tripped on anything like that. And I think it was due to, somewhat lack of numbers and just somewhat, with the often changing of faces, people not necessarily constantly being there long enough to establish anything, right? Now, this next situation that I'm gonna get into, this is not something that I heard about, right? This is something that I was there for. So I want to say late 2016, early 2017, right, suddenly word hit the yard, and it spread around the yard rather rapidly that someone who had a extreme amount of juice when it came to the Southerners had just hit the yard, and he was over there in the reception center. Now keep in mind, you had some Mexicans and blacks programming together on this yard in a much more friendly atmosphere than you would have at other prisons, where there was more of a political ideology going on, and political barrier between the two. Because I think for a lot of people who have not gone to prison and they hear about the racial segregation and separation between blacks and Mexicans in prisons, they get the notion that blacks and Mexicans don't talk to each other, we're not cordial with each other. And no, it's far from that. We talk with each other, we're cordial with each other, so on and so forth. It's only times that when there's trouble brewing, that things get real political. On this particular yard, you had some Mexicans and blacks who, were cool with each other, doing business with each other. Every now and then you may have a Mexican come into the black cell and get a burrito, or vice versa, right? If you had a Mexican there who chose to associate himself with the blacks more frequently or more closely than other Mexicans did, the other Mexicans there, they didn't trip on him as far as trying to push a line in a physical way. Maybe they, shunned him. Maybe they didn't talk to him as much. I don't know. But they definitely didn't trip on him if he chose to, deal with blacks in a more hands-on way than he would at any other prison. Now, when this individual gets there, who is of extreme importance, I failed to mention that he is being released from the indeterminate SHU in Pelican Bay. This is around the time they had the End All Hostilities Act was put together, formed, and they came to that agreement and they won that lawsuit. Now, when I'm saying they, I'm talking about those individuals who were doing indeterminate SHUs in Pelican Bay. So once that lawsuit was won, and the basis of that lawsuit was that sending a convict to the SHU indeterminately was cruel and unusual punishment. Now, you had some individuals who had been sent to the SHU for nothing basically more than a write-up, had sometimes been in the SHU 15, 25 years, right? Just sitting in the SHU because the prison administration claimed that they was part of a prison gang, a gang that was formed in prison, not a crip or a blood gang or a Southside gang, but a gang that was formed in prison. They had sent them dudes to the SHU indefinitely, right? And so once they ruled that was unconstitutional, they started to release those dudes and send them to different prisons around the state of California, right? So now, word has hit and spread across the yard that this individual of great importance, as far as the Southsiders are concerned, is in the reception building, and he will be getting released soon, right? And so several different individuals told me, hey man, chill, did you hear this? Whoop-de-whoop is going on, so on and so forth, man. So definitely keep your eyes peeled, right? Now, like I said, normally they would leave an individual in that reception cell for about 24 hours. If my memory serves me right, they kept this individual of high importance. They kept him in there 3 or 4 days at least. The administration is concerned with what may go on. They're worried about what may happen. And these dudes getting released from Pelican Bay around this time, this was something that was extremely new to the administration, right? And so they're wondering what's going on as well, right? And like I said, this is not something that someone told me or whatever. This is something that I was there myself for. Now, on the day that this dude is scheduled to be released from the reception building, there is an unusually large amount of COs on the yard, much more than normal, because of course they know the protocol and the practice of previous Southsiders who wanted to remain in good standings with the structure. They knew that they had came there and left by way of violence. So of course they're curious and wondering about what's going to go on, right? So eventually he's released from the reception cell. My bad. And another thing that I failed to mention earlier in the story, along with this individual of high importance, there also came someone else from Pelican Bay from the SHU with him, and they claimed that he was like his right-hand man, his lieutenant, something of that nature, right? And so when these individuals were released from the reception cell, they came out to the yard and they made a couple of laps, right? They walked around. Then all of a sudden they went and posted up on some tables, right? And they sat there for a while. They sat at those tables. Then you slowly started to see a couple of other, Mexicans who had already been there go over there, and they had a few words with them. So of course, pretty much the whole yard, their eyes are glued to what's going on. You know, some people are taking periodic glances. Some people is just straight staring because, like I said, you know, this rumor had hit the yard and it had been going on for the last couple of days that somebody of big stature was here. And so, of course, everybody is curious to what's going to transpire, right? So after sitting at those tables and talking to a few individuals for about 30 or 40 minutes, they eventually make their way over to these bleachers that's behind the softball field. And slowly but surely, all the Mexicans that's on the yard started making their way over there, heading over there. And so basically they were having a meeting. Now, normally under most situations, when you would have a large gathering at the bleachers or at the softball field, the administration and the guards are going to go over there and break it up, you know, because they don't want a whole lot of people gathered. But for whatever reason, they chose not to do that. So they stayed over there. They had their meeting 20, 30 minutes or however long it was. After the meeting, they left. They started shaking hands. Everybody left and separated, right? So now word was being spread that all those who were there before he arrived were now considered good. And this yard was now open and a good yard for the Southsiders to be at, right? And so you had a lot of people who was amazed. A lot of people, like, you know, was like, well, okay, this yard is now cool for the Southsiders, right? And so from that point on, slowly but surely, their numbers started to increase, you know, because now when some of them got there, some of them who obviously had not planned on staying, once they heard the news that, okay, no, you know, such and such is here, this yard is open, this is now a good yard for us, they started to stay and their numbers began to increase, right? And so as their numbers begin to increase, slowly but surely, now they need more real estate than they initially had before, because like I said earlier in the story, they had not had any established real estate, you know, any benches that was theirs, any workout spaces, things of that nature. So now, of course, you know, now that their numbers are increasing, they definitely want some of that stuff, right? And also, you also have the dynamics going on. You have had a lot of Mexicans who had got there when the yard was no good and they had chose to stay, and some of them had got comfortable in doing business with the brothers there, right? So due to all those dynamics, no real estate, you know, people doing bad business and so on and so forth, it definitely was a powder keg or a bubbling pot waiting to blow over, right? So anybody who had done time, anybody who had done any considerable amount of time could see an eventual riot coming, right? And it was mentioned to me by at least 3 or 4 dudes who I can specifically remember, like, hey man, you better get ready, man. You already know a riot is getting ready to kick off soon, right? And so maybe about 4 or 5 months later, my points dropped down to a level 2 and I transferred to CMC West, right? So now from this point forward, the rest of this story was shared with me by 4 or 5 different individuals who I knew who happened to be there during the time of this riot, right? And so basically what I was told was initially there was some little issues going on because you had of course, the Southerners wanting, you know, they want benches, they want real estate, they want a workout pile for their people, right? And so, to my understanding, there have been a couple of different standoffs at nighttime, primarily with the Bloods and the Mexicans, right? But basically with the blacks, but it initially started with the Bloods, right? Now, from around the time that the dude of great importance got there and I left, it has been at least 5-6 months. And before I left, almost every week, you could definitely see the numbers of the Southsiders increasing because, like I said, now this prison is a good prison for them to be at, and so now they're coming and they're staying, and their numbers are greatly increasing, right? And so then they have a couple of standoffs about workout areas, you know, tables, so on and so forth, right? And so you definitely have dudes on high alert, paying more attention, on point, you know, preparing for, you know, this brewing situation that they have going on, right? So now on a Sunday, I believe it was, after you've had a day or two of standoffs and discussions between, you know, blacks and the Mexicans about, you know, the real estate and so on and so forth, it's Sunday morning and they have released yard, right? It's maybe around 9:30 or 10 o'clock. So what I was told then is you have a couple of Bloods who happen to go to the bathroom. Now, the bathroom is no bigger than a small office. In that bathroom, you have to walk up a little ramp. You open the door. Immediately when you come in to the left, it's a small sink, and I believe it's 2 toilets, and that's pretty much all that's in there, right? And so now, like I said, you have different individuals piling in from different prisons, different institutions, and so the dynamics and the atmosphere has changed, and the attitude of a lot of these dudes who may have been there 2 or 3 years earlier has changed, right? And so now you got these 2 bloods, they going in there. One dude is using the bathroom. You got one of the bloods keeping usalama on his homie, which is basically a Swahili word for he's keeping security, right? So while his homie is facing that way using the bathroom, he's got his back to his homie, and he's pretty much just making sure nobody comes in there and does anything while his homie is not paying attention, right? Now you had this white dude come up in there by the name of Mumbles. Mumbles was probably about 6'2", 6'3", maybe about 170 pounds, skinny dude, right? Now, Mumbles had been there for a while. If I'm not mistaken, Mumbles was either from Northern California or Central Valley, California, somewhere up in there, right? Now, Mumbles had been there before this dude of great importance had pulled up. Mumbles had got there and he had chose to stay, right? Now, Mumbles, he would come over there. He would play basketball with the blacks, you know, even though he programmed with the whites who was there. He was one of those individuals who would come over there. He would play basketball with the blacks often, right? And so, you know, he was accepted. He'd come over there and stuff. Now, he wasn't in the cell with a black dude. He would just come over there and he'd play basketball with him. He liked to play basketball, right? Now, I'm going to keep it 100. Mumbles had a whole lot of heart. Maybe about a few months before the dude of great importance got there, Mumbles did some type of dealings with a black dude from up north. Mumbles pretty much told the dude, hey, man, for whatever reason, I don't know, but Mumbles pretty much told the dude, hey, man, I'm not paying you. You're paid. Mumbles was doing business with this black dude from up north, and he was getting whatever he was getting on credit. And for whatever reason, he told him, hey, man, I'm not paying you. You know, you paid after he had used whatever he had gotten from the dude. Now, the whites are never in large numbers in any prison, right? And much less at this prison, right? But I think Mumbles ended up firing on the dude, punched him, you know, and they got into a little scrap or whatever, you know. So Mumbles definitely wasn't no punk, right? So now back to this bathroom situation. Mumbles happens to come to the bathroom, right? And the blood tells him, hey, man, listen, you can't come in here right now. You know, my homie is using the bathroom. Now, earlier, you know, before all this change in the dynamics and the dude of great importance had got there, there wasn't any rules like that in Mumbles' eyes. So Mumbles is basically like saying, hey, man, you can't tell me I can't come up in here. You know, I'm supposed to come up in here and use the bathroom or do whatever I got to do. But the blood is adamant. The blood is telling him, hey, man, listen, man, look, my homie, man, is using the bathroom, man. Get up out of here or whatever. So they have a few words. I believe Mumbles walks out of the bathroom, right? Once they get out, they have a few more words. For whatever reason, things get a little testy, and the blood, he fires on Mumbles. Poop, pop, poop. They get off on Mumbles. Now, when he get off on Mumbles, another blood sees it, or maybe the blood that was there, who was initially using the bathroom, they hop on Mumbles. He'll meet though. Poop, pop, poop, pop, poop. They get on Mumbles and go to mixing him. Now, when they doing that, you have some bloods way across the yard. And when they see these 2 bloods over there busting Mumbles up with lefts and rights, they automatically assume that the tension between the blacks and the Mexicans has brewed over, and it's a riot between them, right? So they fire on a Mexican dude over there. You know, they get off on a Mexican dude. Boop, bop, boop, bop. So now, once the police run over there and get the situation quelled between the bloods who was on Mumbles, I'm told the Mexican dude who got fired on, he got up and walked over to his people. He got over there and walked over to his people and let them know, hey, man, these dudes just took off on me, right? And so then at some point, they jumped up and rushed all the blacks on the yard. And from there, that's when the riot ensued out initially on the yard, right? Now, moving forward to Matthew Cook. I happen to know Matthew Cook because, like I mentioned earlier, we were on the same tier together, right? Now, why I specifically remember Matthew and his name outside of us talking at one point when I was out there on the yard rapping or in the building rapping or whatever, he came up to me, you know, he was asking me about, you know, some of the raps. And in the course of the conversation, when I asked him, how much time do you have? He said, I got about 5 years left. And he told me that he was in there, if my memory serves me correct, for flocking. Now, flocking is a street term for burglary, right? It also happened to be a black crip who was also on that tier, and his last name was Cook as well. So periodically, when you would have the guard sitting at the counter, when he might announce, "Hey man, Cook, come over to the program office, or go to the hospital, or go here, or go there," they both would stick their head out the door and say, "Which Cook are you talking about? It's two Cooks." So then he either say the other dude's name, or he would say Matthew Cook. Now, of course, most people in prison, especially gang members, they have nicknames. So we didn't call Matthew. He went by the name of M1. So now on Sundays, M1, he liked to go across the hall, I believe down on another tier, and play Dungeons and Dragons. And so this is what he happened to be doing on that particular day, I'm told, when that riot breaks out. So now while they're in the building, right, playing Dungeons and Dragons, watching the football game, drinking, doing whatever they're doing, when they hear the alarm go off, most people who are in the day room, because the windows open out and you can look out and see the yard, they'll get up and try to see what's going on out there on the yard when the alarm goes off. So of course, at some point in time, somebody in that day room recognized that it was a riot jumping off between the Mexicans and the blacks, right? And so what I'm being told was, in that particular day room, because the day rooms are relatively small, you might be able to get maybe about 6 to 8 people in there comfortably. Sometimes you'll have a little bit more, right? But to my understanding, there was only a couple of Southsiders in that particular day room at the time, right? And so Matthew being in there with a few other dudes, man, they jumped up. And I'm told that the Southsider who was in there said, "Hey, man, we ain't tripping. Whatever's going on out there, leave that out there." But unbeknownst to them, he obviously had a weapon on him as well, right? He said, "Hey, man, leave that alone. They got that going on. That's them. That's, we ain't tripping up in here," or whatever. For whatever reason, M1, and who knows, maybe some of the other Crips and blacks who were in that day room as well, chose to run up on the Mexican dude. They didn't accept what he said or whatever, and M1 was subsequently stabbed, and he eventually lost his life. Now, right here is where the story that I'm getting from different dudes gets a little murky, right? Because some people said that M1 was stabbed internally, and he didn't know that he was bleeding, and he ended up going to the hole. Or some people say that he knew he was stabbed, but he didn't think it was that bad, and he refused treatment. He went to the hole, and the injury was worse than he assumed, and he died due to eternal bleeding. The story that I read said that he was taken to the hospital. So who really knows exactly what happened, right? Now, I know at the time of this riot jumped off, like I said, I had been sent right across the street to CMC West. I distinctively remember being on the yard, and then they recalled the yard and told everybody to go back in. It was a Sunday, you had dudes out there playing softball, basketball, doing whatever, and everybody's wondering, like, damn, what's going on, man? Why are we being recalled? So eventually, when we go back to the dorms, somebody is listening to the radio or whatever, and they get word that it's a big riot going on over there at CMC East. I definitely remember this next part clear as day, right? I almost want to say that it was that same day, later on that day, but it possibly could have been the next day, right? But there was a dude there by the name of James. Now, James has his radio out, and he's listening to the news report about what's going on over there at CMC. And he asked me, because he knew that I had came from CMC East. He said, "Hey, chill, man. Yeah, man, a dude ended up getting killed over there in that riot, man. Do you know a dude by the name of Matthew Cook?" I said, "What?" I said, "Damn, man, that's M1. He said, "Yeah, man, he was about, and he gave his age, or he gave whatever he heard from the news report." And I'm like, "Damn, man." They said Matthew Cook. He like, "Yeah, man, Matthew Cook." I'm like, "Damn, homie, that was M1. Yeah, I was on the tier with M1, And then I explained to him, how I had met M1, so on and so forth, right? So yeah, man, that's definitely a sad occurrence, Now here M1 is at CMC East, right? What many will say is a very soft prison, but like I said, man, at the end of the day, prison is prison, right? And regardless of any type of title people will try to put on prison, you still have violent individuals in prison, right? And you still have circumstances that can break out and can get violent, right? And now here's this dude, right, who From what he told me, he had 5 years left. Now, I think some of the reports that I seen that said that he had 13 or 14 years and he was several years into that sentence. And I don't know if he was getting half time or whatever. But like I said, during the discussion that I asked him, hey, man, how much time you got? He told me about 5 years, because he's like, damn, chill, man, you got life. I was like, yeah. He's like, man, you vicious on that mic. It's pretty much what he was telling me. He's like, man, I hate to hear that, And so then, of course, I asked him how much time that he had. He was a relatively young looking dude, right? Here he is at a prison that is not necessarily known for a lot of violence, right? But a riot jumps off and he loses his life. One thing that I definitely can say about CMC is that due to the lack of political dynamics that you would have at other prisons, and due to the lack of danger that you may feel at other prisons, you definitely had a lot of convicts there who would do certain things or take certain liberties that was a definite no-no at other prisons, right? But I guess they thought that due to being at CMC, they could get away with certain things they wouldn't even try at other prisons, right? And for a time, some of these individuals may have been able to get away with some of those things, right? But CMC definitely had a high rate of violence, right? I've seen many stabbings, many slicings there, many dudes knocked out on the yard for trying to be slick. But a lot of those dudes who thought things like that were unpleasantly surprised when they ran across an individual who was not going for that, right? At the end of the day, prison is prison. And you have individuals in any prison who, if you disrespect them, will definitely try to take your life. Case in point, like I spoke on earlier, before the dude of great importance got there, any Mexican who was there who happened to leave there and go to another prison, he would definitely be in trouble. So some of the Mexicans who chose to stay there chose to stay because they had a short amount of time to do, and their plans was to parole and go home and not go to any other prison. Therefore, they would never get in trouble, right? Now, knowing if they went to another prison and they was going to get stabbed, one would assume that they would try to stay out of the way, do their time, and go home, right? But like I say, man, I'm gonna always keep it real, and I'm gonna always give a dude his props. There was many times when you had Mexicans there who felt disrespected by blacks, and they handled their business. They didn't let possibly getting in trouble at another pen prevent them from being men. So at the end of the day, man, prison is prison. And last but not least, my condolences go out to the family of Matthew Cook. Hey, rest in peace, M1. You already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to life. Resume normal program.